Okay, so anybody that doesn't know me, I'm John Racanelli, Chicago SABR. Thrilled to have former White Sox pitcher Wayne Edwards here tonight to talk to us a little bit about his career and playing baseball and what he's doing now and what he did after his career and so forth. It looks like things are sunny there and beautiful in Southern California. Hopefully a little bit better weather than we enjoy here in Chicago in the summer. Although it's in the 80s and humid, I would rather have this every day of the week than zero. So
yeah, that's true.
All right. So how you doing, Wayne?
Good. Thanks for having me, man.
No, I'm glad you were able to do this. I appreciate it.
And I want to hear the name John Racanelli. I like the Italian in it, man. That's what I love.
Racanelli.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes,
I've been kind of
exactly.
hooked on that. What's that show that's got now? The Offer? You know, the how they filmed the Godfather. It's pretty interesting. So now I'm into all that. You know, eating a little more pasta, having a little more red wine this week. So there you go.
Good. It's good for your heart.
Yeah, there you go. I like that.
In moderation, right?
Yes, in moderation.
All right. So if you're not all that familiar with SABR, basically we are the Society for American Baseball Research. We like to get into the weeds, talk to former players, former managers, former coaches, and so forth. And in terms of doing these sessions, we try and put together a little bit of a slideshow for you to kind of go through your background and your career and so forth. So I just wanted to try and share my screen and see if I know how to do this right off the top here. Let's see. Yeah, looks like we started a little bit after. Okay, can you see this?
Yeah.
The title screen? Okay, good. Okay, so in terms of kind of taking you back a little bit, picture of here with Birmingham, a couple of pictures with you with the White Sox. Fellow lefty here, so always good to have a southpaw. Just kind of curious a little bit about what life was like for you as a kid. How'd you get into baseball? Who did you root for as a kid? Who was your favorite team?
Oh gosh, that's easy. I mean, growing up in Southern Cal, it was the Dodgers and the Angels. And my dad, he was so awesome. I had a younger brother, younger sister, so that's four. Mom didn't like to go to the games as much. So dad would take us. We probably attended like 30 plus Dodger games and 30 plus Angel games. Dad was cool, missed some school here and there, but it was nice. And of course, that's back when you could afford to go to the games probably and, you know, do that. But constantly watching that. In fact, I remember I was 12 years old, sitting around. It was a Saturday afternoon, finished my chores, mowing the lawn, what have you. And I remember we were watching a baseball game and I go, "Hey Dad, how come I can't play baseball?" And he literally, we got up, we went out to the car, drove me down to Mission Hills Little League, and they were having signups, man. I signed me up. Of course, I went down there, and the next Saturday they had tryouts, and they actually pulled my dad aside and said, "You know, he's lacking some skill set. You might want to take him to Parks and Rec." So I remember hearing that and thought, well, that's kind of horse crap. But I ended up playing Parks and Rec. Then after that, never played Little League. So and then it was funny because fast forward now, I finally get that major league debut card. I grabbed about 10 of them, went back to Mission Hills Little League to the snack bar, threw them in there, and said, "Don't ever tell somebody they can't play." And then now as a cop, I'm like, oh my God, it's got my address, where I live, date of birth. I was like, so probably not the smartest thing to do, but I felt a little vindicated, so it was good.
So who was your favorite of those two? Did you go Dodgers? Did you go Angels?
You know what? I'll be honest with you. Back then, when Nolan Ryan was on the team, because that's the guy I used to love watching, you know, I would say both. I was all in on both. And then when he left, I was really bummed. I started watching, you know, Mike Witt and some of those guys, but you know, so I still rooted for them, but I probably started leaning towards the Dodgers after that because, you know, with Jerry Royce, and it just seemed like the teams back in those days, no matter where you went, guys didn't jump ship for, you know, a point something million or point, you know, they stayed with their teams. There was some loyalty. So, you know, Ron Say and Davey Lopes, Bill Rush, all those guys, you know, I grew up kind of watching them. And then it got to the point where where my dad was getting the tickets for the California Angels, they called them back then. They started we didn't get them as much, and I could still get the Dodger tickets. Joined the Tommy Lasorda fan club for $20. Got to go to 6 games, sat up in the nosebleed section, but I was a card carrying member for a while till the lamination wore out. So, so I'd say I still now it's the Dodgers and the Sox is who I watch. So
Is it the same thing that you experienced in Southern California growing up, where kids are kind of put in a position where you choose one or the other? Because in Chicago, it seems like there's very little it's on the playground of, yeah, I like both teams. You usually have to kind of pick your
yeah,
own.
yeah. Well, I noticed that in Chicago too. You're either a Cub fan or you're a Sox fan. There was no in between. But out here, now it's back then we were you rooted for everybody. That was cool. Any local team, which they were local. But now it's funny. I even see on Facebook when I look to see some friends of mine that are big Angel fans, and boy, it gets a little more divisive. So it's almost turned to that Cubs White Sox type mentality. Now people are more, you're either an Angel fan or you're a Dodger fan. And unfortunately, we have some moving from up north down near us, and they're Giants fans. So I have to deal with that every now and then. So, and obviously the Giants and Dodgers have had a history, probably much like the Cubs and Sox.
Yeah, or Cubs and Cardinals for sure.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So in terms of Parks and Rec baseball, at some point you must be identified as having some skills. I'm assuming you must have had some height. And when did you start pitching? Right away, or was it?
No, you know what? My father played third base. So when we tried out, I still my first coach Marty Stoll, I can still remember him. He goes, "What position?" I go, "Oh, I play third base." So he's like, "Oh, really?" So he put me over at third base, and I could stop everything. I was a very good fielder, but he's like, he started seeing my arm. He goes, "Let's move you over to first base." And then it was about the second or third game. Something happened, I forget, you're limited on the pitches a pitcher could throw. So we were getting hammered, I think. So he says, "Hey, Wayne, get in there and throw." So I got in there and started throwing. He's like, "I didn't even know how to stand on the mound. I didn't know anything, but I could throw. I just seemed to have a little bit of movement." So I started doing that. He's like, "Hey," so he started working with me, and there was more. The end of that year, I made the All-Stars. In fact, it was the last game of the season. I hadn't even made the All-Stars, and we were playing the little Indian team. I can still remember. And the coach came over. I was doing really well, and he says, "How come you're not on the All-Star team?" I go, "Well, nobody asked." So that was kind of so my dad came over and says, "Why is that guy talking to you?" Next thing you know, I was on the All-Star team, and then things that's where they kind of started going uphill for me. It was or downhill, I should say. It was good. It's the next year I played for the Parks and Recs Dodgers, which I was excited about, and Henry Romero taught me a curveball, and that's where I started, bending stuff. So, and all I threw was a fastball and a curve. That's all I had. I didn't learn a changeup till oh my gosh, I think it was when I was down in Puerto Rico years later. So, and I think that's what kind of helped me kind of jump and get to the next level of pitching. But Parks and Rec was interesting because it was one of those, there was no fences. You just hit it as hard as you could. And if your guy if he could run it down, and you could beat it out before they threw it in. So you got pretty good at stopping balls because you didn't want it to go onto the outfield because it would just keep going and going and go, like the Energizer Bunny. It was pretty tough.
And at some point then you missed hitting? Like when
No, it's funny. We hit back then, and my big thing, I'm not one of these pitchers that says I can hit home runs. It seems like every pitcher says, "Oh, I can hit home runs." I was never like that. I could bunt. I was great at bunting, and I would literally get up there and I could drag bunt. And it was so funny because I'd get up there, and then occasionally I'd swing away and I could hit some line drives. I held my own there. It was funny because you fast forward with the LAPD team, I got to hit, and I told them, "Listen, if I'm going to pitch for you, I want to hit." And I think I was hitting over 500 for it. That was a lot of fun, but obviously not the same, nor near the same caliber, but it was still a lot of fun.
And high school, you played for a school team, or you just?
Yes, Village Christian High School. I went there, and of course back then, what was it? 10th, 11th, 12th was, the varsity. So I played out there. I pitched, and that's actually where that particular coach, he was a big Kansas City Royals fan, so he was big into the DH. So none of the pitchers were allowed to hit. So he always had a DH unless he needed a bunt, and I would go up there. Everybody's using aluminum bats, and I grabbed a wooden bat because I had a little more control, and I do some bunting, and everybody knew I was bunting. I could bunt it over their head, bunt it down a lot, whatever. It's pretty funny. But other than that, yeah, he never let us hit. I'm still resent him for that. No, just
And so you went from high school to, is it Azusa?
Azusa Pacific University.
Pacific?
Yeah, they I went to oh, look at that. There I am right there. Oh my gosh, I was a skinny little kid. I went to Village, and so they had a musical group, a band come out to Village, and it was obviously a recruiting tour for their school. And I went to Azusa Pacific because I wanted to be a youth pastor. So I was a drummer. So I was going as a music major. So I signed up all my classes for the music major. But every time I came back after I had made the baseball team after tryouts, I kept coming back and telling the professor, this class conflicts with this practice, this class. So by the time it was about 3 or 4 conflictions, and he said, you might want to think about a different major. So I switched to business administration, which ended up being more conducive to the baseball program, which was obviously my first love. I wasn't going there to get drafted or anything. I just loved baseball and wanted to play.
That's awesome. So do you know how you were scouted or how you ended up getting on the White Sox radar?
Yeah, it was funny. Jeff Robinson, who was a 3rd round pick for the Detroit Tigers, he was a couple years ahead of me. And in fact, he was a junior. I was a freshman. He took me under his wing, and all the scouts were coming out to see him. My freshman year, I only threw 15 innings total, which is we had a 50-game schedule back then. So what's that? The equivalent of a game and a half. I cleaned the dugout, cleaned up all those seeds, and all the upperclassmen were spitting everywhere. If it rained, we dug holes and took tennis ball cans and would take the water and dump in a 5-gallon bucket and go. So that's what I did. I learned field maintenance more than anything. But my sophomore year, I started getting a lot more innings, and because of Jeff, I think I learned a lot from him and the upperclassmen. Just started getting more innings. Next thing you know, I threw a bunch, and my dad and I, we started noticing scouts were coming out. I had no clue that they were there for me. And then we were in a playoff game. In fact, it was the following year as a junior, the playoff game. I think it was Point Loma. And some people started talking to my dad, and he goes, "Hey, these scouts are actually looking at you." I go, "Me?" And that was crazy because I literally had no idea. I just loved playing baseball. That's all I know. And then the parents were always laughing. It was like, "Oh my gosh, they're looking at your kid." And I'm like, "You got to be kidding me." But by then I had sprouted to about 6'6". I was still only $165. So that was, maybe soaking wet, but I was very fortunate and blessed to get drafted. Dwayne Schaefer, the guy that found me, and I ended up being good friends with him. He's a super nice guy, but that was awesome.
And so was it 85 was your last season there, right? So
yeah, last season, guys, I was drafted June of 1985. So that was and that was fun because they had sent me to rookie ball in Sarasota, Florida. And you talk about, Azusa Pacific at that time, there was Jeff Robinson, Paul Cerna, and Paul Moscow. Those were the only 3 that had ever been drafted. So I felt like I was in elite company, being like the 4th guy ever drafted out of there. And now Azusa is almost like they're just spitting guys out. Stephen Voigt, all those guys. They've there's been a lot of guys come out of there. In fact, Kurt I can't even say his last name, but Nurkenweisen or something. But he is now the head coach over at APU. But they've actually they've spit out a few good prospects over there. So it's kind of nice to rep. But getting a chance to play in rookie ball in Florida, for me, it was such a big deal because we were such a small college. So now here I'm going, and now everybody, it was funny, the guys that came from like UNC and Creighton, all these big universities were complaining about how, oh, this rookie ball sucks. I'm thinking, man, I'm living high in the hog. This is awesome. I'm getting $350 every 2 weeks. This is great. So oh my Lord. Now that I look back on it, well, it was crazy, but a lot of fun. Definitely an adventure.
yeah, and so you were honored with a Hall of Fame selection there in 2007.
Yeah, that was that caught me by surprise. That was really cool. In fact, the guy Gary Pine, who is now the athletic director there, he was a good friend, but he was the sports information director back then, and going to school, getting his master's and all that. But we really struck up a really good friendship and still have to this day. But I called him and asked him to induct me. So it was funny, some of the stories that he had come up with. I was like, man, I don't remember that. I don't remember that. But it was he was really kind. I think the thing that I remember the most is that when he finished, he goes, now when you meet Wayne, I'm just going to tell you, Wayne is the only person I know that can make a rock talk. So I'm like, I don't know if that's a backhanded compliment, but I said, well, I'm going to go with a positive. I'll take that as a compliment, but still friends to this day. It was a fun time.
That's cool. What a great honor.
Yeah, it really was.
Yeah. So speaking of rookie ball,
Oh boy.
here's one of the first research questions that I have. I found an article where somebody was interviewing Kurt Brown, and he said that
He was
his
the
first
number
year,
one pick that year. Yeah.
85, that he shared a small 1-bedroom apartment at a hotel with 3 other guys, including you.
Yes.
And this article says, and I quote, I sleep on the couch in the living room, 2 other guys are in the bedroom, and another guy sleeps on the floor. So
Yeah.
I'm just kind of wondering if you remember where each of these people were and if you were the guy on the floor.
No, so the way that worked, in fact, I remember it was the Calais Motel on Sarasota. It was hilarious. But we would, if you were pitching, because there were starters in there. I think it was me. I think Don Paul was in there. I'm trying to remember if Don he was at the Calais Motel, but I'm not sure if he was in our room. Tony Bar there it is right there. Tony Barlamucci. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Some names from the past. That's so awesome. But if you were pitching the next day, you got a bed. So that was the big thing. Now, after you pitched, you were on the floor. So it was kind of a gosh, you talk about, and that's the funny thing. I remember you got back then, it was $700 a month. So every 2 weeks, $350. And I remember the first 2 nights was we'd have steak, and then it moved to hamburgers, then it moved to hot dogs, then it went to spaghetti, and then I don't even know if they had top ramen, but we were doing that type of things where you just heat the water up and put it up there, and it was just, that's all you could afford. And because some of us still weren't old enough to even drink, so a couple of guys that were 21, they could actually sneak in and you had to buy 2 pitchers of beer, but it was all you could eat, and they would stuff their pockets with stuff and then bring it back. When you'd think we were I hate to say it, but in a prison camp, just trying to survive, like the Great Escape. It was crazy, but definitely fun times. I mean, oh my gosh, that's where you learn to get along with everybody, and just, and it's nice because your only focus was just trying to get better, because there wasn't too much else to do.
All right. Well, that's good information here. Thank you so much for clearing up those major questions that have plagued baseball
So
researchers.
unfortunately, I did sleep on the floor a few times.
Yeah. Okay, good. And it looks like that Peninsula card there down on the lower left shows you without a mustache, and that might be the last baseball card that I found that didn't show you with any facial hair. So you grew that stash and just rocked it.
Yeah, I don't know if my kids tell me I look more like Joe Dirt, so I'm like, that's definitely not a compliment. So they told me, in fact, if you fast forward, you were mentioning Azusa Pacific. I ended up coaching basketball, assistant coaching at Canyon High School out here in Santa Clarita. All my kids played basketball. It kills me. None of them played. They played the little league and all that, but once they got out, it was all basketball. They're 6'5", 6'6", 6'7", so that was their thing. But we played at Azusa Pacific. They would split the courts in half, and it was a summer league thing, and you're just getting games in. Then after the game, we would go into the hallway and meet. Well, the hallway is where all the Hall of Fame plaques were. So there's a picture of me, and the kids started saying, let's go meet by the porn star. I'm like, what are you talking about? And so they looked at my photo, and it's like, I got a porn star mustache, the mullet. And I'm like, oh dear Lord, let's not say that anymore. So I'm like, we're at this big gym that says God first. And they're saying, let's go meet by the porn star. So I'm like, maybe just the stash. Let's kind of clean it up a little bit for me, guys. Help me out here. So, but definitely fun.
So I know you've got some collectibles, bobbleheads, Spider-Man, Star Wars stuff on the shelf behind you. Do you have baseball cards of yourself, or do you collect cards at all?
No, I do. I still have all the factory sets. I remember when, I don't know when I stopped collecting, but all those years, 85 to gosh, probably 96, 97. I would simply buy the tops was the ones I'd buy the factory sets, keep them sealed. And I've got them for all the kids because I have 3 boys. So I bought 4 sets. So I'd have all that, back then, that was the big thing. But ever since I joined, there's a thing on Facebook called White Sox History. And man, I would maybe sign, oh gosh, maybe 20 letters a month. No big deal, however many cards. And ever since I joined that thing, boy, I'll tell you, I've never signed so many. It's humbling, but like probably doing like 300 cards a month. And I was like, they can't even be that many cards of me out there. It's people send, tons of cards, and it's not like you're going to make a ton of money off me. Now, my baseball card, and I personally tested it, sounds the best when you put the clothespin in the bicycle spokes and get the brrr on your bicycle, because that's what we used to do. But I tested mine out because I'm sure I got rid of all my Mickey Mantle, Drysdale. I'm sure I killed all those baseball cards back in the day for my Schwinn bicycle.
So you've got some top sets, but nothing for yourself?
No, I've got a ton of my own baseball cards, because when people ask cards, I sign them, whatever.
Oh, okay.
But so yeah, so I've got, I guess one time I looked, there's like, for the short time I played, there's like 20 or 23, something like that, different cards, which is pretty cool. And I know somebody did one a while back. They did something, they turned it into 3D, which I thought was pretty funny. I don't know. They took some time. So I signed a couple of those. I took some pictures of them because I thought it was pretty clever. But I said, that's a lot of work for a Wayne Edwards card. I don't think there's a lot of money in that. So
Pretty cool though.
yeah, it really was. It really was.
Okay, so here's research topic number 2. There's something about some sweatpants that you wore under your uniform all the time.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Is there a story behind this? Was it superstition, or
It was my college, they were like sweatshorts, and I had always worn them. So what happened is I could not fill out my college pants. I was just a skinny little, so in order to make it look like I even had a rear end, I put on these sweatpants just to, give a little pad. They were, one time I had sliding pants. I am a pitcher with sliding pants. I'm not even on the base path, just something to give me a little bootay in the back section. But then it turned into, I just had these sweatpants, and it was like you said, it was just kind of, I felt comfortable in them. So I'd wear those things just religiously, almost like, Wade Boggs, never stepping on the line, going out to the field, always stepping on third base, coming off, eating chicken every day, whatever. Everybody was pretty superstitious, and that was mine. I always wore those sweatpants till they just finally died. My poor wife stitched those things up. She goes, you got to let it go, Wayne, just let it go. So I finally gave in. So, and then just kind of said, okay, let me suck it up.
Are they on display now at the APU?
No, Lord knows. Those were tossed. She's gone through. I will. It's even to this day. I'll go through. I'm like, hey, where's that one shirt I like to wear? That got tossed. I was like, oh, thanks. So it was pretty good. She made a comment to me one time. I had a shirt on. It was pretty ratty, and we were with some friends. And she goes, hey, Wayne, does that shirt itch? I'm like, no. She goes, well, it did when I threw it away. Throw it away. I'm like, oh, okay. So there we go. So now she's not afraid to get rid of some clothes for me. So now I'm just like, oh, well, Linda must have gotten rid of it. So I just go with it now. Happy wife, happy life. I have learned that.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. So now we are at your major league debut. I think you had actually mentioned this card, throwing a bunch of them into the
yes, this is one of my favorite ones, just because of the importance for me. Obviously, September 11th, 89. Here I get to do something that I love. The reason I joined LAPD was because of September 11th, 2001. And then on a funny side note, when you go from a recruit officer, I became what they call a P2, which is a police officer 2. Well, that was September 11th, 2020, what was it, 2003. And then my salary anniversary date with LAPD was September 11th. So it was just kind of a unique, gosh, that date just really has some meaning. So I think that's why I kind of really get a kick out of this card. Not to mention that porn star mustache going on there. So there you go.
Yeah,
I think there's a little Viking red in there, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh,
yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're ready to plunder.
I might have to, yes. Plunder. And I'm into, what's that show? Uhtred of Edinburgh or Beber. It's The Last Kingdom. I don't know if anybody's seen that. Oh, that's a great show. I love that show. All 5 seasons.
I don't know anything about it.
Oh my God, John, once we get off here, you're gonna have to start watching it, see if you get into it. It's good.
I watched Vikings. That was pretty
Oh
cool.
yeah, I like
I
that one
like
too.
that.
What got me into it though was the Last Kingdom. That was pretty good. A little gory, but good.
Okay, cool. So bringing it back to baseball, it still could be gory, but September 11th,
I had a couple gory games, so there you go.
yeah, 89 at Baltimore. You came in replacing, and I've got this covered here.
Yeah, I can't remember who did I replace.
Daryl Boston.
Oh, that's
And in doing so, you were placed in the 7th hole in the lineup. And then it looks like Carlton Fisk, who was the designated hitter, moved to catcher, and then the team lost the DH. So according to baseballreference.com, you have one batting game because you were in the lineup at one point,
oh,
but you did
see?
not
All
get a
right.
plate appearance.
Nice.
But here you go. Your very first hitter is Craig Worthington. Looks like you walked him, you got him to 3-2. Do you
Yeah.
remember what it was like stepping on the mound for your first MLB appearance?
Oh, yes, it was. I remember. So I remember I warmed up with Carco down in the bullpen. And then here I get to come in. I'm all excited, and I come up to the mound, and I reach down, pick up the ball. I'm facing center field, and as I look up, I still saw this huge sign, "Welcome to the big leagues, MasterCard Visa." And I'm like, oh dear Lord. And all of a sudden something clicked. I'm like, oh dear God, I'm in the major leagues right now. So I'm like, I take a deep breath, no big deal. I turn around, I'm like, what happened to Carco? I'm now throwing to Pudge. I'm like, oh dear Lord, here's this future Hall of Fame. So now I got a little nervous. So now I get up on the mound, and as I told you before we came on, I get up there, and my first pitch, I don't even think it hit the dirt. It skipped in the grass, skips up. Fisk comes up, makes a nice little pick, and he calmly walks out and says, "This much further." And that's all he said. And it loosened me up. And then I went out there and pitched. But I do remember Craig Worthington. I got him 3-2, and Pudge put down fastball. And I don't know what the heck I was thinking, but I shook him off, and he put down curve, and I threw a 3-2 curve. And it was right down the hole there. And Richie Garcia, I think, was the umpire, and he just looked over Fisk and said, "Ball 4," and literally like made sure I saw him. And I'm like, okay, ball 4. And I took it. But I remember Fisk getting up and arguing with him, and even Torborg was chirping at him a little bit like, hey. And then I remember, I think I got out in a double play, and I remember Worthington coming out, and he goes, "Oh my God, that was a nasty curve." And so that made me feel a little better, but I didn't get the call. So unfortunately, my first guy was a walk.
Yeah, so it looks like Bob Melvin is the second guy you faced, wrapped into a third base, second base, first base double play. And then your first career strikeout was
Billy Ripken.
Billy
Yes.
Ripken, yeah.
Yeah, I remember getting him with a changeup. That was kind of my go-to. And that's the funny thing. I watch guys today. I don't see a lot of guys like setup pitches. They're so into the speed and not necessarily the location, at least from my vantage point. I was big. I didn't have the overpowering fastball, so I was big on setting guys up. So if I got you 0-2, it was almost guaranteed I was going to back you up off the plate, and then it was just what I was going to do next, whether I was going to try to finish you off inside, maybe a wraparound curve or a backdoor curve, or just a tailing changeup off the outside half of the plate. But I like to nibble around there, and I got pretty good at it for a little bit, so it was fun. More of a chess game.
And so if you're in the lineup at that point, did you even know that if your spot came up, you might be, taken off for pinch hitter, or were you down in the tunnel swinging the back end ready?
Oh no, I didn't even have a clue until you just said it. Yeah. In fact, fast forward, after I had left the Sox, I'm with the Orioles in spring training, and we were playing. Who were we playing? We were playing the Phillies down in Clearwater, spring training. And Johnny Oates came up to me and said, "Hey, if Macklemore gets out, that's 2 outs. I'm going to let you hit. If he doesn't, I'm going to pinch hit for you," because I'd thrown a couple innings. So I'm like, oh, okay. Well, Macklemore grounds out, and I'm like, yeah. And Johnny Oates looks at me, he goes, "Really?" I'm like, "Sorry, I've just never gotten a chance to hit." So I get up there, and man, I forget who's pitching, but I remember Dave Hollins down at first. John Kruk or excuse me, Dave Hollins at third, John Kruk down at first, and whoever was throwing through me, it had to be a 90 plus fastball. And man, I did not even see that thing. It just went. And I remember turning to the catcher and going, oh my God, I didn't see that. And then he threw me a curve and I swung and I looked so bad on it. It just, oh man. So I said, and I knew, I'm like, this guy is going to finish me off with a fastball away. I'm going to swing as hard as I can and try to go down the left field lineman. That's all I was thinking. And sure enough, fastball away. And man, I swung and I hit a line drive, skip hopped, goes off of Holland's chest, and I beat it down to first. And all of a sudden they're going hit, error. And all of a sudden they're like hit. So I'm like, yeah. And I remember Kruk looking at me, he goes, I've had some pretty awful swings like that in the past too. I'm like, oh man, wait, made me feel bad, but I was happy I got a hit. So I was batting 1,000 in spring training.
That works. You got it.
Yeah, man, I'll take it. And what was that? Like the White Sox, winning ugly. I was swinging ugly, so I was okay with it.
Nice. So you made your season debut for 1990 on opening day against the Brewers at Comiskey Park. The line here is the White Sox drop Brewers in Comiskey's final opener. And this picture is of the Cobra, Dave Parker, frustrated because you came in to start the top of the ninth, struck him out. Do you remember anything about this at bat?
Oh man, I do. In fact, I still have a video. Somebody sent me video of it. And it's so because I remember I got him 0-2 or 1-2, and then I ran him up, and it actually got a little bit away from me. I was trying to come in. I always aim for their elbows because I figured they could move their elbows. And so I aimed, but it rose. So it went up near his chin. And I heard the video of Wimpy saying, woo, kind of getting up and in there. And then so now it goes to 2-2, and I threw a pitch. I remember throwing a pitch away and it just missed. And then, how, I don't know if you remember, he used to kind of stare at you and like look at you like this as you came down. So he did one of those numbers and it's 3-2. So I thought, well, you know what, I'm going to give him a fastball away, see if I can put him away. And he fouled it off. And then I think it was either changeup or curve, and I dumped him, and he swung and missed, and he was pissed. There was a couple of superlatives he said going back to dugout, and then I think Jeff brought a couple of us in just to get our feet wet, so it was kind of a nice thing.
And did you know that was your first career MLB hold?
No, I did not know that.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, that's crazy. Still trying to look, it's amazing. I think about with all the analytics and everything that happened, I'm not a math guy, but I'm just easygoing. It's like, you know what, all that stuff has been there, but now it's being brought out to the forefront, which is pretty exciting. But it's so funny. I says, if I would have known, I wouldn't have known any of that, and the only thing I think that I truly miss is I'd love to see managers every now and then, like Torborg did, go with a gut feeling. You know what I mean? Just a little more instead of, I think it's awesome to rely on some of that, but it's like, man, just every now and go, you know what? I got a feeling this is what's going to happen, and then do it. Because Torborg did that with me. He would go, I remember going, what do you mean? Why am I up? There's a couple right-handers coming up. And Torborg's like, no, I just have a feeling you're going to do good again. I loved that little bit of it, but it's funny because we talk, everybody always asks me, what do you think? I go, man, I think it's pretty cool. I don't get a lot of the launch angles and all that, but I know it's always been there because there's a certain thing it's got to be to get out, but now it's more in the forefront now. So it's kind of interesting to learn some more about that too.
Yeah. And I kind of feel like there's times that maybe it gets overused in terms of taking a number and a percentage and not necessarily playing a batter who's hot, or maybe
Yes.
a pitcher who's on.
Totally agree, man.
Right. So that's kind of, but
in fact, Torborg had a notebook with everything printed out. So, I mean, he had those analytics, but I remember one time I was in the dugout and he turned to Sammy Ellis and he closed the book. And he goes, give me Barry, and he was like, and he brought in, because it's like, you could tell he's like, I want to go, I got a feeling. And that's what he did. And sure enough, we get out of it, but he was, man, Torborg was so good at that. He just had a knack for almost sensing something. I talked to him. It's been about a year now, but I told him, I go, man, you would have been a great cop, because he just had that hinky feeling like, I'm going to try this because I think something's going to happen. He was just really good at that. His spidey sense. There you go. Got my Spider-Man in for you. There you go.
Nice. Did you try and recruit Ron Karkovice to become an actual officer?
Yeah, no, I didn't even know he was a a cop till I started, once I started getting onto social media and all that, I didn't realize he was a cop down in Florida. And obviously I came on at, God, what was I? I was 37, and it was obviously after 9/11. My little brother, who's been on, he's getting ready to retire. He's been on about 33 years. So, so that's the guy that I kind of picked his brain when it all happened. It's funny because when you do that, I ran around to all the different agencies just trying to get on. And then I was fortunate, everybody kept calling, and my brother threatened to cut off some appendages on me if I didn't join LAPD with him. So I figured, you know what? I remember you kind of following through on a couple things. So I'm going to go ahead and go with LAPD. So that was probably a good decision.
And you played some baseball for LAPD too, right?
Yeah, it was, man, it's funny. In the academy, apparently the talking to all my instructors, what my drill instructors, what have you, they kept literally drilling me. You played in the major leagues, you played, and I'm like, yes, I did. And I'm like, why do you keep asking? I don't understand. And I guess they've had people come through and say, oh, I played the majors, I played, and they really didn't. So they'd get caught in a lie, and now they're fired for not being forthcoming. So I guess they thought they were going to fire me. And then it was about a week into the academy after that, my DI came up with some cards. He goes, oh my God, you really did play in the majors. So it's, and then all of a sudden word gets out. My firearms instructor was the first baseman for the team. So unbeknownst to me, he was letting the lieutenant who runs the team know, hey, I got this guy, ex-major leaguer, left-hand pitcher, la da da da. So I was what they call a squad leader. There's 4 squad leaders. And if you are a squad leader, you get 3 choices of the division you want to go once you graduate. So I had put down 3 divisions down south. I thought, let me go downtown LA, get all the craziness and get some experience. Then I'll come back up to the valley and work because I'm a family guy, and be a little closer. Well, right away it comes out and they sent me to Devonshire. Devonshire is the most quiet division ever in the world. And I thought, who did I upset to do that? So I go and I work 2 days, and now I've got 1 day coming off, and then I'm supposed to work 5 more days. It was one of these crazy schedules. Well, on my second day, getting ready to go, what they call end of watch or finish my shift, the lieutenant, Tim Moss, calls me in and says, hey, Wayne, how would you like to play for the LAPD baseball team? And you don't tell a lieutenant no right off. So I simply said, LT, it's been a few years since I've tossed the ball around. You know what? I've got an off day tomorrow. Let me toss it around, and I'll let you know when I come back to work on, I don't know, Tuesday or whatever. He goes, hey, sounds great. The next morning at 7 a.m., I get a phone call. It's Tim Moss. Wayne, I've changed all of your off days. You're going with us to Arizona for the Arizona Police and Fire games. Bring beer money. And then he hung up, and I went, oh, dear Lord. And I played for the department team for 8 years after that. So it was pretty funny, man. It was like, oh my gosh, but it was a lot of fun. They do some good charity stuff too, as well.
Yeah. And so you're involved too with the Elks, right? You do charity work still?
Yes. I've been involved in the Elks about 18 years, really been pretty heavily involved the last 5, and especially the last couple now that I've been retired, but they do, which is kind of near and dear to me. They do a lot of stuff for veterans, just helping veterans. And then our particular chapter where we're at, we do a lot with Child and Family Center, some unfortunate, whether it's domestic violence and stuff, these people need, and it's just great just simply getting to help. It's near and dear to my heart, especially with the vets, because I just think these guys and gals have done so much. So whatever I can do to help them out, I don't care what it is, whether it's standing out, handing out brochures or helping them out, whatever. I know the Elks, the National Fund, they donated all these leather hides to make gloves for the veterans that are unfortunately bound to wheelchairs, so that they have protection for their hands when they're doing the wheelchair. So small things like that, but it's a big thing, in the scheme of it. So yeah, I love doing stuff like that.
Yeah. So kind of getting it back to baseball, what would it be, the 23rd anniversary today, right?
33rd. Yeah, I'm hey,
33rd.
I like it.
Oh my
You
God,
had me 10
33rd,
years
you're
younger,
right.
but I'm not.
Yes. My math was a little bit off there.
Yeah, there you
Your
go.
First MLB start, right? So it is
Yes.
August 10th, 1990 at Comiskey Park against Texas. Do you remember anything about this day?
Oh yeah, that was, I still remember when Torborg told us on the plane, and then as I'd stated in that documentary that the kids did, man, I remember just here, I'm going to get a chance to start. And, that rain out was just crazy. But I remember they said, hey, McMurtry's not going the second game. It's going to be Ryan now. And I'm just like, so your initial thing is like, I'm going to get to sit in the dugout and watch Nolan Ryan from the dugout. I'm thinking, this is awesome, man. That's the first time. I'm like, this is so, and then I'm like, oh dear Lord, wait a minute. I'm throwing against this guy. So I got, so not necessarily him, but so obviously I had to make sure my focus, but I went like 5 1/3, 6 innings. I can't remember what it was, but man, it was just cool because just going back and forth and battling. And because I go back and I have that film and I'm like, oh man, I gave up a good shot there. How did that not go out? So there was some great plays, but when you got guys like Ozzie Guillen back there, Fletcher, Rom, they could stop so much. I still remember coming up, and it was 90. I forget what game it was, and I threw a pitch, and man, I thought this guy hit a double, and I turn around because I'm going to like kind of back up second in the middle infield, and Ozzie comes up, makes the play, is looking at me, and then throws the guy out. And he goes, "Where are you going, baby?" And I'm like, "Oh my." And I said, man, if they're going to stop that stuff, I got a chance of playing here for a while. It was pretty cool. But no, it was it was funny because I have some friends call me like, hey, August 10th, man, today was the day. I go, yes. Not a lot of highlights, but boy, that was a neat one, because just especially the next day when Ryan just looked at me and, when we were running, says, "Hey kid, nice job." And I thought, man, that was, somebody obviously told him that I was a fan for him to even say that, because I know he was always focused in his little world, what he was doing the next day to get prepared. And, I just sat there and watched him even when he was working out, like, God, what does he do that nobody else does the next day? He's just that guy was just a phenom, man. It just, but it was an honor just to get out there. But it was, I started all through the minor leagues. So getting a chance to start was pretty exciting.
And you had a little help from Craig Graybeck and
Oh
Ozzie
yeah,
Plate, right?
exactly. Yeah, no, they because I remember that rain out. It was man, it was an hour to, I forget. It was a long rain out, and I remember the sod father finally pulled the tarps off over there and we got going. But I still remember Graybeck hitting it. I think there was a couple guys on. I'm like, heck yeah, man, I got a lead. I got to keep this now, because but that was, and then when I think I still remember we were high-fiving Graybeck, and then Ozzie, I think it was the first pitch or second pitch, hits it out. And I'm like, did he just go opposite field Johnson? I'm like, oh my gosh, man. So that was, I thought, man, this is going to be awesome. So then I said, okay, I got to bear down. I was all excited those guys did it and just bear down. And then I do remember some of the guys going, hey man, we just went back to back, heads up, this guy might, come underneath your chin or something. And obviously he didn't do it that game, but we all know what happened the next time. It was at the 17th of August. We went back to Texas, and plunk. And then next thing you know, we're all out in the middle of the field, brawling. So I was like, gosh, that was crazy.
Yeah, because Ryan drilled Graybeck the next chance.
Oh man, first pitch just dinged him, man. And I remember talking to Hawk after the game, because he kept saying that was Bush, and I remember Hawk was pretty fired up about it. I think he was on the air too, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, and it looked like you ended up 90 doing pretty well. You got some other starts after that one. Ran your record of 5-3. That ERA at 3.22 is a lot better than league average. So you must have been feeling pretty good after that year.
Oh man, right? No, that I'll be honest with you, that team, having played on different teams, I don't care if it's little league, tiddlywinks, whatever, but that team just, we had such a camaraderie and such a connection. And it's weird. I mean, we did everything together, and it wasn't boring. We just had a blast. I know Matt Flash put that video of me and all the guys playing Game Boy, and I still remember we went to Seattle, and I'm like, oh, the Nintendo factory's here, man. So I called him up, and the guy was a big Robin Ventura fan. I said, I'll get him to go. So a few of us went over there, and they gave us Game Boys and stuff, and I got Robin to go. And man, after that, we started doing, we tried to stay out of the light, so the cameras didn't see. But I remember in Kansas City, they had this big bullpen, and we went behind, and we were taking, we put in $20, and we're all playing 9 holes of golf, Game Boy golf. And then if you lost, you'd have to go back. Okay, you're up. KP, you're up. Don Paul, you're, and it was just, but that's the kind of stuff we did. And it wasn't that we were distracted from games and stuff. It's just that we just had so much fun doing things together, whether it was golf on an off day, We barbecued. We all lived, a lot of us lived out in Willowbrook, Oak Brook, Naperville, and we all got together for barbecues with the wives and hanging out. Man, it was just neat. And even when you go on the road, I remember Dave LaRoche, it would be okay, we're having a bullpen night, and that bullpen, we'd go out with Barry Foote and we went somewhere to eat. We'd have, whether maybe if it was a day game, we went out after the game and stuff, or we'd get together for breakfast. And it was just fun. And we just looked after each other and we talked about, okay, these guys are coming in. Well, we know this guy likes to do this. If you go in, Wayne, do this, or Bobby, if you go in, and Thigpen was just so big in that bullpen having, because he'd say, hey, this guy's good with that off speed. So maybe make sure you keep him off the plate, make sure he respects that outside half. And so we were always talking baseball too. It was just, it was neat. It was a special team, man. It's humbled and blessed to be able to say that I played on that team, but it was a lot of fun. And you know what? I think there's a lot to be said about why we pulled off some of those wins, is because we willed ourselves to that. And Ozzie said it best. That team hated losing more than they enjoyed winning. We just, man, we hated. It's funny because you get in that dugout, and we didn't hold it long, but we, discuss it and then, okay, get them tomorrow. But, maybe if on a charter plane, we'd be talking about it. So it's a special team, man, something to be proud of to play on that team.
I mean, you've been in a number of clubhouses in your career. Do you feel like people talking about chemistry or camaraderie is overblown, or is it a big part of?
No, I absolutely think that is an integral, it's an intangible that you can't teach. It's either there or it's not. Can it be developed? Yeah, but you've got to have the right guys in place, because everybody, there's got to be some discipline. And Torborg with us, there was discipline. If we got a hand, it was quick, and we respected the fact that he, hey, I see this, I'm not gonna let it, and then boom, it was done. And then we went back to kind of doing what we're doing. But I think sometimes teams, they leave that end out of it. They're so into the, okay, well, I've got to hit this many home runs, or I got to do this. And yeah, that's obviously the part that counts. But I think you got to care about one another in that dugout on that team. I mean, you're with each other 162 games. I mean, what other sport? It is a marathon. It is not a sprint. So, and it was fortunate I got to be in those dog days of summer, and I remember the feeling going into Oakland and our team, like stepping on plane, like, all right, all of a sudden it's like a face change. Hey guys, get, it's almost like the Vikings shield wall, here we go. We're getting ready to go play these guys, and they were men. So it was, that's something to be said about that team. And I think sometimes that team can will you to some wins, and vice versa. I think if you don't have good camaraderie, that can take away some wins, because all of a sudden you get in a rut and then you're like, gosh, here we go again. And you're like, no, you don't want to have that mentality. You got to stop it. Jack McDowell came in first start. He'd stop it. If we got in losing, he was going to stop it, or even Melito, or even, Hibby, all those guys, we were gamers, they got in there, they fought, we were fighters. It was good. And I think some teams could use that these days.
Yeah. And so you're kind of transitioning, right? A little bit of, or a lot of what the Last Comiskey documentary was about was transitioning from old Comiskey to the new ballpark. And part of that too was the throwback uniform day. Do you remember this?
Oh yeah. That was a fun day, man. I still got a kick at it. I still got that uniform. I don't quite fit in it anymore, but I still have that uniform.
So the throwback uniforms here, this is old Comiskey, obviously. At the new ballpark, the White Sox, if they use the throwback uniforms, you didn't cut them up with scissors ever, did you?
No.
Oh,
I still have
okay.
mine. In fact, mine is I've got it all, vacuum sealed, because my wife knew that when I retired from LAPD, I wanted to take that uniform and my LAPD and get it on a big wall and get them, mounted. So I'm kind of waiting to do that at the right time to get everything together. We're in the stages of, now the kids are all gone, so we're kind of redoing the house. So that's something I cherish, and I'd really like to get up on the wall so I can kind of display that, because that was a fun day, and that uniform means a lot because the guys that wore it,
Yeah, so the jersey you have on in this photograph, you still have it then?
That's the one. Got the
Okay.
same one and the pants.
Okay. And that hat, it looks like it's kind of an old-fashioned hat, low crown kind of.
Yeah, in fact, I
Mhm.
still, do I have that hat in here? I think it might be in the other room. I still have that hat. Yeah, that one definitely does not fit on my bucket head anymore.
No.
That was, it's a little tighter, but no, that was a neat time. It was funny because I remember putting on that hat going, how are we going to pitch in this? There's the sun, the bill was so short, you could still see it. And you can see Jeff has the one that we actually wore for the games. It was a little bit easier to have that normal size bill, but
Yeah.
that was a fun day, man. That was just, it was just very, just the attitude. Everybody was having a little bit more fun than we normally did. It was really cool. A lot of fun.
Yeah. I don't feel like Torborg's digital watch really is period
Yeah, that's true.
appropriate,
Yeah.
but
And that looks like a Casio, maybe. I'm not sure. So that was the Iron Man there. So
so 1991 brings us to another talent that you had, which
there we
was
go.
playing the drums, right?
Yes.
So you and Jack McDowell and who was it was the
Lee
third
Plemmel.
baseman.
Lee
Plemmel,
Plemmel.
okay.
Cardinals organization at the time.
Okay, so you formed a band and recorded a CD or a couple CDs.
Yeah, actually I did one. He did a couple. I did this one with him.
Okay.
It's funny story is we're in New York and Jack had mentioned that he goes, hey, or he told me that him and Radinsky were going to a music store downtown. It's supposed to be this real big music store. I can't remember the name or if it's even there, but it was a music store that was actually in two separate buildings. One percussion was on one side and stringed instruments and stuff on the other side. So we took a cab, get down there. And I says, hey, I'm going to go to that percussion side and check it out. And he goes, okay, we're going to go over here. So they went to that side and I went up and just start kibitzing with the guy and all that, and mentioned played for the Sox and all that. He goes, oh, hey, you know. So he says, oh, do you play an instrument? I go, yeah, I play the drums. He goes, well, hey, go test out that kit. And I think it was a Gretsch. So I went over there and started kind of just messing around and jamming. And then some guy picks up, like he had like a bass, starts kind of playing the bass. And the other guy starts hitting the piano. I'm like, hey, man, this is a little jam session we're doing. So start playing. And next thing I know, there's a crowd forming in this place. And all of a sudden, Jack comes up and he goes, what the? He goes, I didn't know you play the drums. So we're in there jamming. And Jack, he was still laughing. He's like, I can't believe this. You're in here jamming. So we finished. The guy, I think his name was Marco, now that I think about it. Anyways, I signed a drum head and he puts it on the wall, whatever. But and that's literally when Jack said, hey, man, you gotta play in my band. We're gonna cut an album, la, 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 la. So we ended up doing that in the off season. And because his brother-in-law at the time, was it his brother-in-law? I think, yeah. He we did it all in the studio in one day. It was pretty crazy, but it was a lot of fun. And then doing these crazy photo shoots. It was somewhere in Florida in spring training. That was some chicken coop. And I think the guy says, hey, let's get one over here. And we were like, what? And it ends up being the album cover, which I thought was hilarious. But as I told you earlier, Jack actually got a hold of me yesterday. It was last week, but I talked to him today again. And he goes, do you have any of our CDs? And I had one still packaged. So I sent it to him because he's actually going to be making a bunch. And the deal is he'll send me a bunch. So I have some more on hand, which I thought was funny. So I says, oh, the view's coming back. You never know. But no, but that was a fun time.
And I was able to actually find a clip here. You remember this being
that's
on
right.
This Week in
Yes.
Baseball?
There's that porn star mustache and that mullet. I told you I had one at one time.
And Jack McDowell is a starter, but they also play together off the field. Jack and Wayne make up 2/3 of View.
All right, so it looks like you've got a snare drum and maybe a tambourine.
Yeah, that's a piccolo snare that and it was funny because they call it a Nashville setup. You just get like either a tambourine or a cymbal. So I said, well, what we're doing, I'll go grab a tambourine. I got a mount. I remember we ran to a store and I bought a piccolo snare real quick. And then we just get it because I was trying to figure out what we were going to do. Cause she's like, oh, well, we want to do something at this bar. Let us come in and play. So I'm like, oh, okay. So kind of went and grabbed one of those, which I still have that to this day. It's pretty funny.
Do you have like footage? I mean, there's some that's what's shown on TV, but do you have?
Yeah,
footage?
no, I don't have
No.
any footage of that. It's funny because like I was it's kind of funny but kind of weird too. But if you type in just like Wayne Edwards, like if you say it on like Hey Siri, for a while, if you said Hey Siri, it came up a race car driver. And then if you said hey, Google, it came up Wayne Edwards of the White Sox. But now, in fact, my phone just did it, but now it comes up a couple serial killers. So now I don't ask that question anymore. So obviously somebody took that ahead of me, but that used to be the funny thing. And I tried to find some of these clips. So yeah, I kind of search and even go through whatever I can to find some stuff. But VHS is not so prevalent anymore on the internet.
Yeah. And so this next one is a little bit more.
Plays the drum, following the beat of his father.
He was a drummer in the '60s for a group called the Hondell, and
Yeah.
so he did all the Dick Clark tours and what have you. Did the whole shindig. In fact, he played on a thing called the shindig. But I started playing the drums when I was 5 years old. Been playing ever since.
So your dad was a drummer and recorded
Yes.
a top 50 song, right? Or top 40
Yeah,
song?
he was, it's funny, all these, that 1990 team, obviously there's a lot of PR going, but Tom Hanks comes to visit the club. And at the time, he was doing his background for A League of Their Own. I guess that's what he was saying. So I remember being in the outfield. I was in left field, and the trainer came out and said, "Hey, Tom Hanks wants to talk to you." I'm like, "Yeah, whatever, dude. Right. Tom Hanks wants to talk to me." So he goes, "No, I'm serious." I'm like, "Herm, I'm not biting. I'm staying in. I'm staying out here. I'm shagging." So he goes back in. Well, here comes Tom Hanks. I'm thinking, what is going on? So he goes, "Hey, you Wayne Edwards?" Yeah. So he had mentioned, he starts talking about my dad, about, he says, "I've got this idea in my mind about one-hit wonders." Well, that was obviously that thing you do. He was obviously thinking about back then. And he had asked me a ton of questions about my dad and this, and I just thought it was kind of interesting. So, in my mind, I'm like, gosh, was it loosely based on kind of that or what? Who knows? But back in the day, my dad, he was on all the Dick Clark tours. There's footage. If you type in Beach Blanket Bingo, Don Rickles is in there. And I guess my dad told me that he ad-libbed a lot of that. They were filming and he was cutting up on, Annette Funicello and Frankie and Avalon. And then he was turning around and firing on the Hondells. It was pretty funny. But I guess the story goes, my dad said that where he figured I got my love of the drums was they were doing some studio work. And all of a sudden he took me, and I don't know, it was 3 or 4. And he said, he panicked and stopped. He goes, "Where's little Wayne? Where's little Wayne?" And my godfather, Dick Burns, who's the guitar player, said he's down there. And I was sleeping on the pillow in the bass drum that's used to muffle the bass drum. And he's like, he goes, "I think that's when you got your love of the drums, probably hearing that boom, 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 sitting in there." So I go, maybe so, but love playing the drums. I got them set up. I got my little man cave in the garage. And then in 92, when the Sox sent me down, I bought a guitar. So I've taught myself guitar. So I jam on guitar and do a little bit of anything. I just love music, period. So it's a lot of fun.
So your dad was like genre-wise surf rock, is that what you would call it?
Yeah, it was Beach Boys. They
Yeah.
backed up the Beach Boys on a lot of stuff. It was that surf music. In fact, a guy, Chuck Girard, did a lot of their studio singing, and he is the gentleman there was a movie just really, the Jesus Revolution, but that was, he got into all that. He was in a group called Love Song, and that's kind of turned into a thing once they kind of got out of the realm of the beach music. So it's everything kind of was an offshoot, but yeah, that was the big thing back then. I grew up on all the Beach Boys, and I went to Village Christian. We weren't allowed to listen to that Satan music of Kiss and Led Zeppelin, all the stuff I listen to now because it's so freaking awesome. But it was funny. It was just a little bit a different time back then at the school I went to. So I was like, oh my gosh, I missed out on all this great stuff, But it was cool. Music's just always been a big part of my family and a big part of me.
I mean, besides the View CD that you recorded with Jack and Lee, any other bands?
I played in a lot of bands
Yeah.
that, local bands, play in either blues clubs or bars here. The last one that I did, we were playing a lot of state fairs. It was Johnny Walker and the Whiskey Shooters. It was a big country. Now I'm a big country guy now. I love all music, but country's kind of my go-to, kind of like Woodford Reserve is my go-to. Well, country music's my go-to. And we were doing a lot of stuff, and then COVID hit and just kind of messed everything up. And then unfortunately our lead singer ended up having some vocal cord issues, and we just never got going again. So now it's just somebody will call, "Hey, I've got this gig, can you jump in?" And I might go jump in and do a little gig just for a one night thing, but it's still fun just to get out there and jam a little bit. And then with the Elks, I'm on the barbecue team. So it's become a tradition, get there early in the morning, barbecue for whatever the event is. And then at the end of the event, we grab a beer, get around the fire pit and start jamming on guitars and just kind of singing and doing whatever. And it's, that's a lot of fun. I think that's probably some of the most fun I've had. It's enjoyed doing that, seeing people sing, maybe not necessarily hearing their voices, but obviously playing guitar and singing is a lot of fun.
And so you took part in the,
Plays the drum.
oh, and sorry. You took part in the Last Comiskey documentary. I know Matt Flesh was maybe going to be on the call. I don't know if he is here or not, but
Oh yeah, I just look at it. He says, "Oh man," because he's out with the kids right now. He says he's trying. He says, "I'm going to have to listen on tape delay." So I'm going to tell him he's fired.
So I know that you played a pretty decent role in it, had some great stories, obviously very entertaining. As far as the stories that you told, were there any ones that you kind of wished made it into the final cut that didn't? Or did he use pretty much everything that you guys talked?
Gosh, I'm trying to think. It was funny because Matt, and I noticed this and I didn't realize, my wife brought it up. She goes, "You know what? I think you were like the only non-Zoom interview." And I think if I go back, because I think everybody else was in Zoom, and Matt had come out to California for a business thing. And I'm like, "Well, come on by." So he came by and we sat out back. And it's funny because I'm building a barbecue. I've got foul poles and I'm trying to mimic, I have written on the wall, Old Comiskey dimensions. I'm trying to make it look like Old Comiskey, my barbecue. So obviously, and then my neighbor says, "Oh, you should put some ivy up." I'm like, "Oh, blasphemy. That will not happen, lady. That's only in Wrigley. That will never happen here." But anyways, Matt came out and he interviewed me out here. And gosh, man, we talked about all sorts of stuff. So I was trying to think. He said he's still got a bunch of footage, but I'm trying to think of anything that that didn't make it. I thought it was funny when Don Paul mentioned how, Dave Roach said we're having a bullpen meeting, and he came out there, we're just sat out there and drank beers and kind of relaxed, because there was, I remember Ron Ventura and I, we did have a rain out, and when they called the game, the guys are still in the bullpen, and Robin and I ran in, we grabbed a cooler and ran it out to the bullpen, and we sat out there for hours just kind of shooting everything and just basically having a couple cocktails. And that was probably some of the funnest stuff we did, was just the offshoot stuff. I do remember on the plane when we would take our charter flights, everybody would kind of bet, and you know how they have those plastic safety cards or whatever. Well, I would go up to the front, kind of close to where Torborg was. As soon as the plane took off and got at the angle, I had 2 cards on the floor, and I jump up and I try to put my feet on those 2 cards and try to slide all the way down to the back. And I'd usually invariably hit an armrest or something. And Torborg's like, "You've got to stop this. This is crazy." But yeah, I think some of my more crazy moments were on the charter flights, because it's we got a little crazy. I do remember one time coming into Midway, and you guys that have ever flown in there, it's like a knuckleball express. But they were coming in, and I went to the back and I got on the speaker, and for fun, I was trying to mimic a captain's voice. It's going, "If you look out to your left, you'll see, Lake Michigan. And if you look out to your right, oh my God, it's a Sears Tower. Pull up, pull up, pull up." And all of a sudden, the door to the pilot just flies open. And I'm sure my eyes were like this. I remember going, "Oh no." And that pilot came straight back, and you kind of read me right, and basically, "Don't do that again." But as I watched him, and the guys were laughing, but they were as I watched him go back up front, I saw him go to Torborg, kind of elbowed him. So I said, "What did he say?" He goes, "Hey, that was a pretty good one." And so I was like, "Oh," so he wasn't too mad at me, but that's usually the stuff I got voted the flakiest left-hander in Baseball America one year. It's probably for stuff like that.
So
I wear it well. I wear my badge well. So
nice. Do you feel like there was something that after Matt left and turned the camera off that you're like, "Oh, I wish I would have told this story"?
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's nothing, because it was exciting, the stories that he brought up, and just when he said that, "Oh, I talked to Ozzy," or "I talked to Don," and then they remember. It's amazing what people remember, like the things that I remembered, and then the things that other people didn't remember. I think that's what I enjoyed about that, sitting in that documentary and hearing fans bring up stuff, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I forgot about that." So there's nothing really that I think of like, "Oh, I wish this was in the documentary. I got to tell you, I just thought that they captured like the heart of the team when those guys did that documentary. It made me, it was watching that, and I've watched it a couple more times because it's just it gives you a lot of pride knowing that you got to experience that time and that team, and I remember when he asked me, I says, I was excited to come back there just to be a part of that. That was pretty fun, but nothing that I'm like, oh, I wish I had, got that in. It's funny, as I rewatch stuff, I start to remember things, and that's what I should start writing that down and going, okay, I remember this. And then if we ever yak again, then I probably would have some stories, because there is some things that jar you and go, oh yeah, that's right. But nothing that off the top of my head go, oh, this story. But I sure enjoyed all the stories the guys had. That's for sure.
Yeah, it was obviously a labor of love. There was so much footage that he got from people that had handheld cameras and video cameras within the ballpark.
Yeah, that was
And
crazy, man.
it was amazing. And as a fan, from the seats, the nostalgia that just flowed back from watching the documentary was at sometimes, goosebump.
Right. No, I'm excited. In fact, I see Dave Fletcher down there. I just finished my Band of Brothers book, and Chili Dog MVP is the next one on my list. So I'll be reading that one. I see him down there. I'm looking forward to getting some more stories about that. So man,
Thanks,
that'll be exciting.
Yeah, so that was really all of the questions that I had. I know, Wayne, you said before we got started that you were perfectly happy to answer some questions.
Oh,
spend as
totally,
much
man,
time
totally.
as you wanted. So I'm gonna stop sharing this. And let's see. We've got some questions on the side here. What were the minor
yeah.
leagues like in the mid 80s? When a year or so ahead of you in Appleton with the White Sox won 3 titles in a row. Any stories despite you skipping the league?
The Appleton Foxes. I think that's what they were, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. Wow. Oh my gosh. It's funny when you put up that picture of the Peninsula White Sox, man, that was my first full season. Rookie ball was a short season because you get drafted and you go there, but going to your first full season, and I'm sure you can remember this, Dave, is like, I remember it's like you get there once you break spring training camp, you're like, okay, I got to find a place to live. I got to live with 3 other guys so I can afford to get a place to live. Oh, I don't have a car. I remember we bought a car for $500. And by the time I roomed with 3 other guys, by the time we were done, it was just me and Mark Henry. And we sold the car for $35 because the guy said the only thing that was worth was the battery still in the car. I'm like, oh my gosh, it was great. Because the back windshield had blown out. So that's guy in the minor leagues, you're just trying to survive. Oh my gosh, it's so funny. But that first full season, the travel and just the small town, being in small locker rooms where you're dressing right next to guys, and oh my gosh, it was, and then my first experience we had a team party that the actual team, the managers of the Peninsula White Sox put on. And that was my first experience with sipping some grain alcohol, AKA Purple Passion. Oh, dear Lord, I will never do that again. That, you talk about getting schnockered. It didn't take long. And I was only $1.85. So that was, but yeah, some of those were kind of the fun things that, that the minor leagues. And then of course, getting another $150 more. I went from $700 to $850 that year. So thought I was living high on the hog, even though I had a room with 3 other guys. But I had a bed, no floor, so that was nice.
That's good. It's a step up. So it looks like Kirk Weber asks, was the NAIA World Series played in Lewiston, Idaho when you were at Azusa?
Oh yeah, in fact, it was 1980. The 84, it was the 84 team that we ended up being runners up in the nation. It was, man, they had a coach, Lewiston, Idaho. They were the ones that won it all. They had a coach, Chef. He was crazy. But that experience going back to Lewiston, Idaho was probably the closest thing that would have been like what it was like in the minor leagues, in the travel. Because you go back there and it's what, best of 3 series. So it's pretty quick. But just seeing other programs and what they did, Coastal Carolina, Lewis and Clark. I'm trying to think. There were some other teams out there, but and there were some guys now that looking back that got drafted off of some of those various teams. Some of them were Bible schools like us. Some were just smaller NAIA schools. The NAIA, I don't even know how many are around anymore. That was everybody seems to be going to NCAA, but that was an experience in itself. And what's funny is, I don't know, I guess it's past the 7 years, but there was a Lewis and Clark World Series 4 foot by 8 foot sign that was off to the side of the road that had fell. And I don't know how it happened, but it ended up in my parents' RV, made its way all the way back to California. I don't know how this happened, but it is now the backdrop of my man cave where my drums are. So it's kind of cool. So I have that in there. So I still can, I can relive those memories just seeing that each time I go play my drums. It's pretty cool.
Wow, what a weird coincidence that it ended up.
Yeah, I don't know how that happened. It just
yeah.
flew right in there. Strong wind.
Okay, so Dr. Fletcher says, how was your relationship with Sammy Sosa?
Sammy was good. And Sammy, he was, he was still developing, in who he turned out to be, but he was a go-getter. He was flash. You know what I remember most about Sammy? He had so much gold around his neck. I used to tease him. I go, how can you even hit the ball with all that stuff? It just weighs you down. But you know what? Sammy was a good teammate, hustler. I remember Ivan Calderon, kind of taking him a little bit under his wing. And, now that I think about it, Ivan had all the gold around his neck. Now that I think about it. So those guys, they were two good buddies there, but Sammy was always hustling. And, he took some big hacks and he connected on some that saved us a lot, man. Cause when he sent that thing over, but, I remember he still, and even I remember watching him when he was in the race with McGuire, he still had that strut. Sammy had that really cool strut when he jogged out to the field. And I just thought that was such a neat strut that he had, he just kind of went out in that gold flying and all that. But, no, he was a good teammate. Got along with, we all got along with everybody there, the position players, they would hang out with each other because they were doing the batting practice and all that. But, as a team as a whole, we all hung out, man. Everybody got along and always picked each other up. And Sammy made some great catches to save my rear end. That's for sure.
All right. So Bill Perch asked, do you play Immaculate Grid?
Do I play
And if
what?
so, Immaculate Grid.
What is that?
I guess that's a no.
Yeah,
It's
Immaculate
basically-
Grid.
It's a game. If you look up Immaculate Grid,
Oh, I'm
you
gonna
you have 9 squares.
right.
You have to guess players either based on 2 teams they played for or a team and an accomplishment
Really?
they have. So we'll have to get back to you after you play.
Yeah, you know what? I just
Okay.
took a picture of that so I don't forget the name. That's
Yeah.
pretty cool. I'm gonna check that out.
Yeah. And you'll have to get back to us then and tell us what it's like to play as a former player. I'm assuming you might have a little bit more knowledge about White Sox players that you played with and who else they might have played for. I find myself at some points thinking I should turn in my SABR card because I have a hard time sometimes when the Rockies or the Diamondbacks come up. I'm like, I'm not even going to try this one.
That's funny.
All right. So Tom Nurse asks, who are some of your favorite players today and why? Doesn't need to be White Sox or Dodger or Angel.
Well, obviously, probably my favorite pitcher, he is a Dodger, Kershaw, just because he has that big bender of a curve, The guy with, and I'm having a brain fart right now, Atlanta Braves pitcher. He's really, why can't I think? And that's, I watch him all the time. God, but I'm put on the spot and I can't think of his name. But I enjoy watching some of the Braves pitchers because a lot of those guys, they pitch inside. They kind of pitch how I would, like inside, move the ball in and out, move it up and down, changing speeds. I like that. In fact, they have, God, there's 2 of them. Why can't I think Snicker? I can't, God, I got to look up his name now because now it's killing me. But I like those guys. You know who I'm glad to see? I liked watching crazy Kiki Hernandez with Boston, even though I'm not a Boston Red Sox fan. So now I'm glad he's back with the Dodgers, but I enjoyed seeing his energy. I enjoy guys with a lot of energy. And I know I liked watching crazy Clevenger when he was with the Padres. I would watch him because he has that little rocking motion, which drives me up a wall. And I don't know how he does it, but it's almost like a rhythm thing. And obviously now he's with our Sox. But those are probably the guys. I mean, the guys that I miss are like the Mike Gallegos, Don Mattingly's, guys like that. There's, Wade Boggs, and those are the guys. I remember Wade and Mattingly, they were just so strong with their wrists that they could get fooled with a off-speed pitch, but they were just so good at keeping their hands back. They could still pop a double off the wall because they were so strong. I remember Steve Sachs, he took me to, when we went to Yankee Stadium, he was with us. He goes, come on, I want you to see Don's drums. So we go in there, and Don Mattingly had a room with his drums set up. So we go in there, but he also has a speed bag. Don Mattingly is talking to us while we're trying his drum set, and he's just doing this with his speed bag. And I'm looking at his forearms just like Popeye. And I thought, how can you talk, not even look at that bag and just do that? I mean, that just tells you what kind of a hitter that guy was, but those are probably, I know they're not guys that are playing today, but those are anybody that plays like that are the guys that I love, man. I love seeing those kind of guys.
Okay, so it looks like Dr. Fletcher's got another question. How was the mood in Boston for the final series of 1990 after the emotional closing at Comiskey Park?
Yeah, that was, that was crazy. It's funny because I still remember Phil Bradley talking about, hey man, I was bummed, because the season's over, whatever. And Phil Bradley was like, Wayne, this was a championship season. I thought, what are you talking about? We're in second place, But he said all those years that he was with the Orioles, he said, and you have all those tough losing seasons. He goes, this was a championship season. Yeah, we didn't take a ring, and I thank God if they'd had 3 divisions, we would have won that division. But he said, you've got to enjoy these moments because they don't come around that often. And I have taken that into everything I've done. So when that season ended, man, it was so bummed. I remember, I don't want to say guys were teary, but, guys were hugging each other. Of course, Steve Lyons was running around. Hey, can I have your tickets for playoffs? Can I have your ticket? Because he was going around giving everybody playoff tickets. But, it was tough. And I still remember when you're folding up your stuff to put it back in your bag, like, hey man, I'm not taking this out. This season's over. I'm not taking this stuff out anymore, And then in the back of your mind, you look around going, hey, what do I need to take from this locker room? Is there anything that it was just, it was tough. It's always tough when a season ends at no matter what level. But I think the fact that our team was so close, you're saying your goodbyes being professional, but deep down we knew, hey man, this was a special time, special era, just because what went on with that stadium. But it was a special time with us knowing that, man, we were so close to pulling that off. When they said, you guys are going to finish in second to last place, it's man, we held our own and then some, so it was tough to leave. But it was still something, you cherish that moment. But it was like anything, you knew that, well, you just like, when you graduate high school or college, you never know when you're going to see those guys again, if ever. So it was, that was tough. And now just thinking back, it's like, yeah, that was the last time you see some of those guys, because they're either going to other teams or what have you.
So Dave Malabud asks, how was Frank Thomas when he first came up to the bigs? And did you think seeing him back then that he would become what he did?
It's funny. I remember everybody telling us this guy can hit, Frank Thomas coming up, and he came up and he was nice. And I remember he had shoes, his shower shoes said, don't believe the hype. And I remember going, hey, what's that? Because he's a, Baron. He goes, oh, I don't want to get caught up in all this stuff. I just want to enjoy my time and all that. I'm like, hey, that's cool. And then I remember he gave himself the name, the Big Hurt. I'm like, hey, what the heck, man? So I started, and it obviously stuck, and he did well. But, when you watched him hit, you just knew, you're like, man, this guy, because I mean, in BP, I remember they brought him up just to, like, they'd sign him to come in. I remember we were going out there watching, I'm like, hey, this guy's hitting stuff like Kittle off the roof and stuff. I mean, he's hitting some bombs. And I remember talking with Danny Evans. He goes, this guy is going to be good, and now in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, they just signed him. He's the assistant GM. Of course they're going to say that, but then you start watching, like, hey, this guy can hit, man. He's not putting stuff out. He's lighting stuff up going out. So, back then you have no idea what somebody's going to become. But as you move on, whether it's with a different team or that team, you're like, hey, this guy's still doing what he did when he came up. So that's when you realize, probably a couple years, 2 or 3 years down the road, I'm like, man, this guy's legit. He's doing what they said he was going to do, So that's when I think it was more 2 or 3 years later, like this guy, I knew he was good, but it's like, oh man, now he's really good, and he just proved everybody, what everybody said, he proved it by what he did.
So Bruce Allardyce asks, who is your favorite manager, either in the majors or minors?
Well, I think Torborg, all time, my favorite manager, and just because the way he handles stuff. Now, the other guy that I really enjoyed, and a lot of guys didn't like him, and he was goofy as they come, was Ken Berry. He was my manager at Double-A, and some guys, he did some unorthodox. You talk about somebody that did not use any kind of analytics or any kind of paperwork saying this is best to do here, best to do here. I mean, he threw that all out the window and he went by gut feel. I remember one time he wanted Matt Murillo, bases loaded, no outs, wanted Matt Murillo to bunt. And we all went, what? Matt's hitting fourth lineup, and Matt gets up there and hits like a bomb to the center field wall. Didn't go out. The guy ends up, tagging up scoring, but it was, that's what Ken Berry did. He just did some crazy stuff, but he was off the wall sometimes, but he was just fun to be around, man. And I had guys like Rico Petrocelli, Bob Bailey, Mark Hill, who, was the catcher, the bullpen catcher he was a hoot too. He was a lot of fun too, but we had some fun times. That's in Daytona Beach. I think that year I'd won 16 games, man. And we had a blast. In fact, I think back then we faced Melito Perez, and we had a huge brawl with the Royals, if I remember back then, in A-ball. That was funny. And here he ends up being my teammate years later. So, but I would have to say Ken Berry in the minors, and definitely Torborg, and I got to play, do some spring training. Obviously I was, 94, 95, I was in big league camp with Tommy Lasorda, who, I grew up, watching, but Torborg's a guy that actually I got to be mentored under. So he was terrific.
So Michael Marsh asks, what's your opinion of the pitch clock?
Okay. So this is recorded, right? Okay. So this is going to be forever my answer. I got to be honest with you, man. I don't like it. I am a true fan of baseball. I mean, I'm one of those guys who says, man, if you think the game's too long, well, then don't go, and I know what they're trying to do. They're trying to, get every walk of life, every person there. But it just seems like, if you watch it, I know for a fact, like here they get rid of the pitcher hitting, which I liked that dynamic. So they get rid of that because they said they want to expedite the game. Well, now you got an extra DH. That doesn't expedite it. That technically would make it longer. And now I know they added 15 or 20 seconds to every half inning of a commercial. So the pitch clock and that, if somebody's taking too long, I get it. Maybe they should make a rule where, hey, you take too long, but it just seems like they're almost like they're putting a lot of expediting the game on the pitcher's shoulders, as opposed to maybe the player's shoulders. So it's like, hey, okay, throw fat, hey, you can't use that much rosin. Now like, oh, you're getting you're getting kicked out because you got too much rosin on your hand. I'm like, oh my gosh, man, I used to load up that rosin. So as the sweat dripped down, it was tacky. I mean, I would have been booted out of every other game by the rules they have now. So, yeah. And I know, and I know it's not so much that, okay, I don't want the game to like absolutely change or not evolve, but, isn't some people even saying they want robo umpires? I'm like, come on, I don't want to do that. I like that part of the game. You need that dynamic of the game, just to see what's going on. But like when Reggie Jackson stepped into that throw, that was it Lopes or Bill Russell and knocked it off, and Garvey's, yeah, man, there's a rule about that, but that's part of the game. That was pretty fun. Nowadays they go back, well, let's go back and look at the cameras and rule for half an hour and then decide. But that's part of the dynamics of the game that I enjoy.
And I think we've got time for one last one. We're up at an hour and a half now. I appreciate all the time you spent with us, but Alex Stairs just wants to know, what do you recall of the Andy Hawkins no-hitter where he lost 4-0?
Man, I remember going, dude, that guy, hard luck, man. Just everything would go wrong. I remember, I don't know, it was the next day or the next time we saw him, I remember just going, dude, that had to be so hard to deal with. And he goes, part of the game. What are you going to do? I mean, gosh, that guy, a no-hitter with errors. I think it was Jim Leyritz. I can still see him just trying, because I remember talking to Jim years later going, dude, he goes, oh, don't remind me, Wayne. Don't even ask me about that fly ball. It was just, gosh, that was just, talk about tough luck, oh my gosh, that had to be so hard, man. Gosh, too funny.
And it looks like we just got one last comment here. Dr. Fletcher says Dan Evans contends the 90 Sox would have won the World Series if there was a wild card. What do you think?
I'm calling BS. And you know what's funny? Danny Evans, who I love to death, but is the same guy that when they said before the season we wouldn't even finish out of last place. Well, here we showed everybody we did. I say we would have. I think we could have done some stuff. Now the Reds, I think the Reds they were tough, but I still say we would have given some people a run for their money because we found ways to sneak wins. You know, we found a way to do it, man. And man, I'll take that to my grave. I think we would have been in there. I really do, man. When I see Danny, I'm gonna have to tweet that and say, hey, dude, no, I'm just teasing.
Well, Wayne, this has been awesome. Thanks for spending all this time with us. Fun stories, just awesome. So
Yeah, thank you for inviting me. This was that's one thing, especially the SABR thing, but just Chicago has just got a special place in my heart. And going back to that little documentary and just getting to when it was done, walking and talking to people in the crowd, man, I could have stayed there for hours just hearing the stories. And that was so humbling to talk with people. Chicago fans, man, they're the best. And I put them above LA and everything. Chicago fans are they get it. They know their teams. They know, and that's the problem with some of these people out here. So, and I always defend them. I get into it with some of my fellow Elks. I'm like, no. I love watching the Dodgers, but I'm just telling you, the best fans I have ever dealt with is Chicago. And White Sox fans will kick their butts if they don't. No, I'm just teasing, but it's pretty good. So.
all right. Thanks so much, Wayne. This has been a blast.
Yes, sir. Thank you guys for coming out. I enjoyed answering questions and just hanging out.
All right. Maybe we could do it again sometime.
Heck yeah, I'm in.
All right. I'm going to stop recording.